I think the good life is really being about being in harmony with ourselves. And we all have special gifts. We're not, we are joined and interdependent in many ways, but we also have unique gifts. And it's really about falling in line, in love, and in flow with our unique gifts in the service of love. And being true to that no matter what we do on the surface, being true to those core guiding principles. And that may mean that you're not a multimillionaire, but it means that whenever you walk through the streets, you'll always have a smile on your face.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Rev Seifu Anil Singh-Molares. Seifu is the Executive Director of Spiritual Directors International, a motivational speaker, a Zen priest and spiritual companion guide director, and a global executive manager with a varied career as a spiritual companion, journalist, a scholar, a corporate leader, an entrepreneur, and a nonprofit expert. Whether leading Microsoft's International Strategic Partner Program as Senior Director for 12 years, starting and or running 3 nonprofits, co-founding a management consulting and international services firm, or advising individuals and groups on how to implement meaningful and lasting spiritual changes. Reverend Seifu knows how to transform big ideas into practical realities. A social entrepreneur and thought leader, Reverend Seifu looks to combine the best practices from the world of business with a commitment to practical and compassionate spiritual growth. How you doing, Seifu?
I'm good, Broderick. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you. You have quite the background there, and I'm looking forward to see how that has informed and shaped your take on what it means to live a good life. I just read that biography, but I like to ask guests to share how they would like to introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you, Broderick. So I'd say that these days I have 2 incarnations that are really one, and it's as a Zen priest and a spiritual companion. I do run Spiritual Directors International, which is an organization of 7,000 spiritual companions around the world. We can talk a little bit about that if you want. But I would say that the key to who I am now and who I hope to continue being is as a spiritual companion to others, someone who helps them go through the door to their own sense of deeper understanding of the unknown, the infinite, and the beyond, as we say in Zen Buddhism.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I am definitely excited to unpack a little bit of that as we go along. I'm sure that's all going to come into this conversation. This concept of the spiritual companion and Zen Buddhism and all those different things. So with all that in mind, what is your view of the good life or what it means to live well?
Yeah, for me, it's a life that is dedicated to love, and love with a capital L, not just the love of this relative world that we inhabit, but the kind of love with a capital L, the love that was, is, and will be, always will be. And so living a good life, living well, means being in harmony with that movement as much as possible, in service to it. Knowing my fallibilities as a human being and being able to address those on a continuous basis as I go along. But it's really a life of spiritual companions to others and to myself as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. For me as well, this love is everything to me. That's my guiding principle as well. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely want to ask you to unpack that a little bit more. Can you say a little bit more about this love with the big L? I know you said a few things, but can you elaborate a little bit more
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So for many years, I was my academic background is philosophy and literature and theology, and I was looking for the truth with a capital T when I was in my late teens and early 20s and through my 20s. And as I'm now in my 60s, I've resolved that it's actually very simple. There is this arc, the universe bends towards love to reframe Martin Luther King's Jr.'s very famous quote, and aligning with that love with a capital L in everything that we do. There is no higher purpose and no higher meaning to our lives, in my opinion. Certainly to my life, I will say. And so that means lots of things, but it clarifies, it simplifies and clarifies, and it doesn't simplify in terms of dumbing down. It just makes um, the morass easier to navigate. I say in every moment, in every instance, am I being in tune and in flow with love with a capital L? And if I'm not, which happens, then how do I get myself back in that flow with grace and with as much grace and simplicity as I can muster?
Mhm. So would you say that love you've mentioned flow and
Yeah.
harmony several times here. So the way I look at love is this resonance, this connection that is without distinction.
Yeah.
It's this flow. I know it's hard to put into words. It's hard to put into words what this is, but we're pointing in a direction towards it.
Yes.
This sense of, well, actually, I want to say, what does that feel like in a person? How do you know that you are experiencing love?
Yeah. So the I love you pointing to the experience because I think that's the ultimate measure of our alignment with this this force. And it's it's fairly easy. There's days when anything is possible. If you have a strong contemplative practice, as I'm sure you do, and many of our listeners do, certainly I do as well, then the more contemplatively immersed we are, the better we flow. Things that would normally be obstacles give way to revelations and insights so that the obstacles turn into invitations and the challenges turn into opportunities. So that kind of flow also means that something that is not us, something that is working through us, allows us to meet people where they are without even knowing how we're doing it. Something is happening bigger than us through us. And the opposite is also true. There's days where, I call them stay home days, where you can tell that it's going to be an oppositional day where things are not where we are not in flow and something is dysregulated in us, and that's a day and an opportunity to really kind of tend to ourselves and make sure that we're doing the work necessary to get back into alignment. And those are days where everything, contrary days, right, where everything that you attempt to do, even if it's well intentioned, actually runs into some kind of obstacle, and instead of being an invitation, it is an obstacle.
Mm.
It is an obstacle. And so knowing how to release ourselves in front of those obstacles, I think, is also a good opportunity. But those are the days where I know that I'm not flowing as well and that I need to do more work to regain my flow.
Wow, you stepped in something that's I feel that's really important there is that we do have those stay-at-home days. That's a natural part of being a human being that, I know a lot of what I'm trying to convey here on this podcast, and I'm assuming I know a little about Zen Buddhism,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming that that you can agree with me on this to an extent, I suppose, that we're not saying you're going to be a perfect person. That's why we're exploring these ideas. That's why we're having this conversation. And I
Yeah.
love that, a priest such as yourself who's dedicated to this work can say that, yes, there are stay-at-home days.
Yeah.
There are obstacles. And as you said, that those obstacles do become opportunities themselves. And we're a work in progress. But to have these practices, to have these tools, to have some guidance can be very supportive in this process of being in flow. Because sometimes I feel like, listeners I know I've experienced this, especially when I was a little younger. I thought it was going to solve all my problems if I just meditate and do all my breathing exercises, do all of my various practices. One day I don't have to deal with the BS, some of the challenges of being a human. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh no, that's just not how it works.
Yeah, I agree, Broderick. I will say that rarely have I seen or not seen an obstacle turn into an opportunity if you give it enough time, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
give it enough time, even deep setback or heartbreak, disappointment, or a failing in our behavior, right? We got angry, we said something we shouldn't have said or didn't mean to say, or we actually hurt someone. Um, those can actually turn into the biggest opportunities for deepening our flow and deepening our understanding. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot about mm, being triggered. We get in our own way on those stay-at-home days. Very often, I find myself having gotten in my own way, and so I need some time to be able to pull back and go, what am I being worried about? What am I fighting here? Why am I fighting? Why do I find myself in that posture? And if I give it enough time, and it's getting faster and faster as I get older, my ability to recover from being triggered gets faster and faster, and my ability to process um, hurt and pain also gets faster. But it doesn't go away, and there's always those bad days, and so it's really um, that stuff is the fertilizer for our spiritual growth.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a great way to say it. That's a great way to look at that because, yeah, these things happen, and it's almost unavoidable. We can avoid a lot of things with these practices, with studying and, having these types of conversations. We can learn a lot and avoid some things. But as we avoid some things, we're going to come into contact with things that are hidden beneath the surface of our awareness that comes out of us, and it gives us the opportunity to explore. And I think, what you're saying is having patience, and I think that these practices teaches you that mindfulness, stillness, awareness. It can teach us to now, as these things bubble to the surface inside of us, as we're triggered by things and it bubbles to the surface, and we say things or we do things, and like, oh, why did I do that? Um, yeah, I often say this, and some people think I'm strange when I say this. I'm like, yeah, I fail. I fail a lot. I
Yeah,
say, but failure is not the end. I pick myself back up, and I have the tools to help me pick myself back up. And if I don't have the tools for that particular failure, I at least know where to look. I at least know where to go to
yeah,
try to get some resolution for a failure that I had. Failure is a part of being a human being. It's about how and what we do with that failure.
absolutely. I would even go extend what you're saying a little more and say that our failures make our real successes possible, and our
Mm,
perceived successes very quickly can turn into failures. also. So it's very kind of, it's the reverse of what we are taught to think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to extend even a little further, I sleep with my shadows. And when I say I
Mm.
sleep with my shadows, it means that I have become so intimate, or in the process of becoming so intimate with my own mm, shortcomings and with my fears, that I sleep with them intimately. And so instead of running away, which is normal human nature, we run away from things that scare us. We run away from things that scare us about ourselves, or if we're scared of other people or other things that are happening in our lives. And really, the way through is to embrace them, nurture them, not nurture them as in blow them up into even bigger fears or shadows, but nurture them as in, you're a part of me that I need to understand so that I can turn this shortcoming into an invitation, not just to myself, but to others. And, I'll give you one example. If when I was younger, I would drink too much. And I haven't now in over a decade. And that's part of my training as a Zen monk. But that understanding of what it means to have addictions allows me to reach across and be able to connect authentically with people who are stuck in their addictions in a way that people who don't have that cannot connect, right? You need authenticity. You need understanding of the shadows and the fears in order to be able to overcome them, not just in myself, but to help others overcome their own addictions and their own fears. Don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I've done something in my life, it may not be the same as someone else, and I've worked through it. I can share that experience with someone else. And that becomes, I guess, it's an example. It's like a metaphor I can use from my life and share that with others and say, hey, you don't have to repeat the same things I've done. Or maybe you can glean something or learn something from my failures, from my experience, and how I am working on overcoming those things, those challenges that I've had. Yeah, absolutely. I love how you're reminding us. I mean, a lot of what you're saying. I guess this is what I can take from what you're saying is living well and being in flow. We want to be in flow, that harmony, that love, which I hope we unpack a little bit more as this conversation goes. But a lot of it is when we're dealing with obstacles, how to deal with these obstacles. So a part of living well is overcoming obstacles, learning from our mistakes, learning from our challenges, learning how to pick ourselves up, not just for ourselves, but also so that we can be a model and example for others to learn from us. Now you're a Zen monk.
Yep.
I'm doing this podcast thing right now. But even if you're working in a grocery store, you're a cashier, and you're working on these things, you never know what kind of conversation you can have with somebody in that particular work setting, or the conversation you have with your colleagues, based on, and if you're doing these things, these various practices, which I hope we'll say a little bit about, and doing these things to help one be in flow and also to help one overcome various challenges, or at least work on those challenges, that's going to have an impact on the lives of others. So a lot of this to me is, um, working through the challenges, not just for ourselves, but thinking about taking into consideration that that's going to have an impact on the lives of others, be it intentional or not.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate with you at all and make any
Oh
sense?
yeah.
So,
Oh yes. Yeah, I think we worry whatever we do, as you said, whether we are cashiers, the janitors, we cooks, priests, podcast interviewers, whatever it is that we do or that we're doing at a moment in our lives, because we're all a continuum of things. We're not just identified by one activity that we do. We tend to worry a lot about things that are very unimportant and not worry enough about the things that are important. And so I would say that the obstacles that we think are real very often have to do with, am I going to have, I mean, legitimate concerns. Am I going to have enough money to pay my rent? Am I going to be, what does my future look like? What's going on with my career? And those things have their place. I'm not saying they're unimportant, but in the background, we all have the little voice, right? The little voice that says, there may be a deeper insight that we need to explore. We're only in these bodies for a short time, a comparatively short time. Is there some ultimate essence that we can look to that we should explore? And we all have that voice, right? It says, yes, someday I'll get to it. This is what happens for most people. Someday I will get to that, right? I have time. I have time. And time is an illusion. So I think a lot of the exercise of our contemplative lives is to bring that stuff that's in the background to the foreground, and let those things that are in the foreground not deny them or dissipate them, but shift them to their proper place, which is in the background. They're important too, but they're not as important as us getting an essence of, what is our ultimate um, purpose here while we are here? What can we do in the name of love? What can we do in the name of our higher calling and our higher purpose, as I was saying? So I think it's also this Taoist insight that I keep reminding myself of, every day, even though I've known it and lived by it for decades now, which is the more I grasp after something, the less likely it is to manifest. And as soon as I release it and I don't care anymore, that's when it mysteriously appears, and easily at that. And so there's a deep insight into um, background, foreground, and releasing the things that we think, actually releasing all things, even the ones about ultimate meaning and purpose, releasing them so that they can settle into their proper place. I think there's a lot there that we could talk about. I will add that when we're faced with a brick wall, running into it never works. And that still doesn't stop us, particularly when we're kids, from thinking that we are strong and powerful enough to barrel our way through any situation. And sometimes we can, but it comes at a tremendous cost, tremendous pain, and tremendous hurt. And it's not the most effective way to go. We have to accept that, okay, we're not going to get through in this way. We're just going to have to flow around. And I think what happens to most of us is we don't have faith that flowing around is going to lead us to where we want to go. We want to go right through that wall, because the answer is there on the other side. And very often it's the detour, the quote unquote detour, that leads us to our true journey, that leads us on our true journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give us an example? Do you have one? Can you think of
Yeah.
some, at least a metaphor to kind of articulate that, clarify that a little bit more?
Yeah. So um, I worked as a Microsoft executive, and I'll just mention that as an example. This was the 90s, and for a decade, from 91 to 2003. And we did well materially, right? We had money, and material possessions have their place. As I said, I'm not denying that they have their importance. Nice houses and the ability to vacation, to put our kids in good schools, whatever it is. And fought really hard to get to that point, only to reflect that now that we had all of these material possessions, we were perhaps even more unhappy than when we started. And why is that? Because these material possessions, even though they have their place, are not going to answer the questions about ultimate purpose, ultimate essence, and navigating the unknown. And I think we could talk about the unknown here for a little bit as well. And so I think that's a good example. You ended up with a lot of people who were very wealthy materially and very deeply unhappy, almost in direct proportion. The wealthier they got, the more unhappy we got. And there's a balance to be achieved. And so by releasing ourselves from that pursuit, we actually facilitate the manifestation mm, of love in our lives in a way that's not possible otherwise, because we're so focused that we're blind to everything that's happening around us beyond what we think we need to accomplish, which is running us straight into this wall.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, yeah, material things are great. They do satisfy an aspect of us. There's a certain level of material possession that's beneficial,
Yes.
absolutely beneficial to the good life or to harmony. So the favorable conditions, at least. But to
Yeah.
a certain extent, what are we doing? And I guess the thing behind that is what's driving us. And we see that it's a wall, but we just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Yeah.
I have some ideas. I'm just curious. What is that's driving us to just keep going and pursuing this? And I think people know. We
Yeah.
know when we should be like, yeah, I know this is not healthy for me, but
Yeah.
I'm compelled and I feel like I have to do it. I have
Yeah.
to pursue this, even though I'm not happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the way we've been socialized, right? We've been socialized to be tanks, right? And that's, I don't think that's overstating it. We've been
No.
taught that anything that is worth accomplishing in this life is achievable only through relentless willpower, and force of character and determination. And all of those things are beautiful attributes, and they can be very valuable, but they can also become very counterproductive very quickly, because then you're barreling your way through everything, not just through your job. Suddenly you're bringing that stuff home, and you're barreling it through your relationships with your partner, with your children, with your friends. And um, that's a tough way to live. That's a tough way to live, and a very isolating and alienating way to live, not just to the people that we are alienating in the process, but to ourselves, because we're alienating ourselves to ourselves as well in that process. And I think it's just the way we're raised, and it's reflects that we don't have enough of a focus, because we're not given that opportunity to look on the spiritual life, however it might manifest for each of us. And I'm using the term spirituality because this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with religion. It can, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with religion. And so I think that's the wall, is the wall of our socialization, right? I mean, little kids can have fun until they're 5, and then the fun's over. Playtime is over. Now I get to school and start studying and get good grades and move up and compete, and you have to make a living. You're gonna have to put a roof. All of those things are true, but they're completely out of proportion to everything else. There's no room anymore for spirituality or music or beauty or poetry or the wind blowing on our faces, and appreciation of that, or mountain climbing, whatever it is, whatever it is, those things. So we're out of balance. We're socialized out of balance, I think.
Yeah, with you on that. Yeah, we've been conditioned and we believe that this is the only way to be. This constant pursuit of things. And so I get it. I understand. I do it too in certain things. I just relentless and
Yeah.
not getting enough sleep. I'm like, well, I'm not just pursuing material things, but then I'm pushing myself in an unhealthy way such that I'm not getting enough sleep. Why
Hmm.
am I doing this? I'm doing this for a good reason, for a good cause. And for me, it makes me think like, okay, then you say that you're doing this for a good cause. But as you say, I've been conditioned, I've been socialized to think that I must push through and cause illness in my body. I don't care how healthy I eat, how much exercise I do, but if you stress yourself excessively, there's a price to pay for it. and it's beneath the surface of our awareness. And things like cancer can come about, you know, all kinds of other things, ulcers
Mhm.
that people have. They may have a lot of material possessions, or they may just have lots of spiritual friends. But this excessive um, pursuit, this excessive drive, like you say, drive is important, but excessive. And when it manifests in physical illness, is it worth it? Is
Yeah.
it worth pursuing that? And I think it's hard to let that go because we're so conditioned to believe that you need to be a producer. You need to produce something. What am I producing? And if I'm not producing, then maybe I'm not even
Worthy.
no, no, yeah, I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not worthy within the context of the society that I'm socialized in.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for social capital. We're all doing it, and a lot of times we're doing it subconsciously. We're not aware that we're doing it. But it's like, I want to look good. I want to look good. I want to feel worthy in this society, in this community that I live in.
Yeah.
And I think we have to question that grand narrative. And how do we include some of those things that you're speaking of? The stillness, the quiet.
Yeah.
Let me. What isn't it? It's also important to experience that wind on your face. Just experience that.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, oh, I went to the beach today. That was the most important thing. Or I went for a hike today. That was the most important thing. So you can tell your friends, I went on a hike. But did you enjoy the hike? Were you present when you went on the hike? Were you present when you went to the beach? Went to the beach. And I think that, but that's hard. I think it's hard if you don't, especially when you're socialized to be a particular way. It's hard to see that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I feel, I mean, maybe I'm biased in the things that I've been doing and exploring. I think philosophical exploration is important, absolutely. But some type of practice that train us to be aware of our mind, to be aware of the patterns, aware of our habits of mind. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to see that we're doing that. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. No, no. And I agree with you. It's difficult. And the only way that it happens for most people is a, the equivalent of an emotional heart attack, right?
Yeah.
And which is you lose someone that you love dearly. You lose your parents or your loved one, or something happens, some calamity or tragedy befalls you, or befalls someone that you actually care a lot about, and that makes you rethink your priorities in life, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is what happens anytime we have a big tragedy like 9/11, right? Where one minute we're all worried about our own little, tribal scuffles at the workplace, and who's doing what to whom, and who's on top and who's on the bottom, and how can I get ahead, and something as tragic as that happens, and then everything drops, and you go, none of this stuff is really important. None of it amounts to anything. So why am I spending so much time and energy consuming myself in the service of these trivial things and ignoring the important ones? And I think it also has to do with, go back to the socialization. We're taught that feeling the wind blowing, and actually sitting at the beach and looking at the sunset and listening to the waves crashing and letting ourselves be immersed in all of that is a waste of time. Is a waste of time, right? We're too busy to do that, any of that. Too busy to even meditate, because that takes up time. You're just sitting down and not doing anything. And I'm not. This is. I certainly don't believe, but but I know a lot of people actually do believe
Mm-hmm.
that the purpose of life equates to working as hard and relentlessly as we can in the service of the acquisition of material things, social capital, recognition, estimation, being lauded and esteemed. And it's there is a place for all those things, and it's usually, it's about being in proportion. but
Yes.
we've lost our way, and it's up to us. It's up to each of us. Nobody can gift us that back. We each of us have to say, I am going to make a determined effort to actually appreciate the sound of the waves crashing at the beach. Now, there's where you should be putting your efforts, and that kind of effort is actually um, not pushing through. It's just yielding.
Mm.
It's just relaxing. It's just flowing. And that requires effort too. But it's a very different kind of effort than the one we've been socialized into. And that's why it's so hard. It's like, wait, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to relax when I'm at the beach because I'm worried about 10,000 other things that I should be doing that I'm not doing while I'm supposed to be enjoying the sunset. And so I think that's why I believe in so much in this modality of spiritual companionship.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, I think you also hinted at, and it's something I try to stress as well, is we're not saying that that stuff has no value whatsoever. No,
Yeah,
it's that balance you're saying. It's the harmony, and being able to see that something is out of balance here. You can
yeah,
look at the health of the society. I think we can see this in our society as a whole. A lot of the health problems that we're seeing, mental health crises, just physical health crises that we're experiencing, is an indication that we're out of balance. We measure as a society, as a culture, GDP. We look to economists who are
yeah,
looking at abstract mathematical equations and talking about abstract ideas of the rational human being, uh, and and saying that, well, if a society's GDP is at a certain rate and if it's constantly increasing, there's a correlation between that and the well-being of that society. But that's missing a lot. It's a measure of production, and it's a measure of the exchange of goods and services. Well, mostly goods.
yeah,
And is that or is that our measure of the good society? Is that our measure? Even if I'm a person who has no awareness of that, even if someone's listening to this, like, I don't know what GDP is and I don't know any of that stuff. I don't pay attention to economists. This doesn't apply to me. It
yeah,
does, because we're all a part of the narrative. We're all a part of this story that's being told, and it's trickled down to us in our actions and our behaviors. And we forget that there are other aspects to life. I don't have a problem with measuring GDP. That's one aspect of looking at the well-being of a society, and I actually think it's important to measure that. But if that is the main or the primary measurement of the well-being of a society, something is wrong. Something is way wrong when we are not socialized or conditioned to enjoy the beautiful, the good, love. That is an invaluable aspect of what it means to live a good life. We take it as superficial
yeah,
because you're like, oh no, you can talk about that in the home. Yeah, that's a given. Everyone knows that having a loving relationship is important, etc. We don't have to dwell on that. We need to focus on producing stuff and
yeah,
exchanging goods and services. And if we focus on that, all that other stuff would naturally come. That is not evidently true if we look at what's going on in our culture and our society. And I think the work that you're doing with spiritual companionship,
yeah,
having these types of conversations, I feel is an important piece of that puzzle. And say, hey, I didn't say give up on your will and your desire to accomplish things, and to I do feel like it is important to have a character that's embedded within the culture or your society that you live in. That's an important part of moral development, in my opinion. So
yeah,
you don't want to take that away. But am I looking for social capital, raising my social capital for what, though? Based on what I have materially, or based on how loving of a person I am? And I think that that part of how much of a loving person that I am gets lost. It's not even counted. We don't even take that into consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I also think it has, I agree with everything you just said. Um, I think it also has to do with another aspect of civilization, which is even more mm, subversively embedded in our psyches, right? Which is the whole notion of knowledge.
Mm.
And what we know with certainty, with scientific certainty, is the only thing that is worth holding on to. And anything that we cannot measure or understand intellectually, rationally, is not worth indulging in. Now, that's a very broad statement, but I think it points to our fears, right? We want certainties in our life. A bank account is a measurable certainty. How quickly I've come up my career and what post I hold is a certainty. Have I met, do I have a partner? Do I have children? Do I have a legacy in that way? That's a measurable certainty. Or some people might argue that's not true, but let's postulate that accomplishing all these things is part of navigating the path of the known, which gives us certainty. And I think the spiritual life introduces us to the very opposite, which is all the things that we don't know and cannot know, and making ourselves comfortable with navigating the unknown. And when I say knowledge, the part of it, and this is because I'm a Zen priest, but it's also, I think, innate to anybody, no matter what your religious path or spiritual orientation, which is, the knowledge that we have is not the same thing as the certainty that we can experience from experience itself, right? We can feel certain things, and they're not just dreams or illusions. You can feel the enormity of the universe and be okay with it, not be afraid of just being a little speck of dust on one of an infinitely growing number of galaxies out there, right? And so that takes a very different kind of skill set, and I think that's where contemplative practice comes in. It just says, yeah, you're never going to know this with your head, but you can feel it in your heart. You can feel that love is, at least in my opinion, probably yours as well, is the arc, is what the universe is bending towards. You can feel that, and you can demonstrate it to yourself on any number of ways, in an intuitive, experiential way. Then we can try to describe it like we're doing right now with this conversation. We're trying to describe that or point to it, but it's not a set of academic formulas or scientific formulas. So I think a lot of this has to do with what we consider knowledge, and maybe the distinction between knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, there are these. Oh yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, we reduce knowledge to knowing material things, and we reduce knowledge to our mathematical abstractions of material things.
Yeah.
And anything outside of that, like, going to a sunset and experiencing that, that is a type of knowing. It's a type of knowing that I can't put a mathematical formula to it. I will probably never have that experience ever again on that particular sunset, on that particular day, as its own unique experience that I can't put words into it. That is, not only is it valid knowledge, that is important form of knowledge, and it does deepen our sense, our wisdom. I feel, because I think we don't. I don't. When I go and sitting in nature, for instance, as an example,
Hmm.
I can just be with it. I don't have to sit and think about, okay, let me name all the trees. Let me name all the birds. I want to go learn all the names of all these flowers. I want to see how I have distinctions for everything.
Yeah.
I need to do that. And now I know. Now I know the forest. Really? Do I know the forest, or do I have abstract concepts of the forest? I don't know the forest actually, because
Yeah.
I wasn't present with it. I denied myself the opportunity to have a non-cognitive experience of it. I
Yeah,
lost that opportunity in that moment because I was caught up in, oh, I want to know everything that science has, every scientific description of this environment that I find myself in. I don't
yeah,
need to do that.
yeah, yeah. That's very well said. And I often use this analogy. It's like riding a bicycle. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody can have written the most comprehensive manual about how to ride a bicycle, 1,000 pages on the laws of thermodynamics and balancing and how to do it. And you have to keep things in proportion, and you have to and none of that is going to help you have the experience of riding a bike. And none of that necessarily has anything to do with the experience of riding a bike, right? And yet so that's a perfect, I think that's what you were pointing to is you have to experience certain things. You can't just reason your way into an experience.
Absolutely. Or a thing that we often do is detach ourselves from the experience so I can reason about it. I'm just like,
Yes.
no, what are we doing? And then we're conditioned to do that. And that's a hard one to think about how to overcome.
Yeah.
And I think you and I can talk about how to overcome because of contemplative practice, and we're interested in philosophy and these types of things.
Yeah.
But it's a challenging thing for people to overcome that. Even if you're not supposedly highly educated, it's so embedded in the culture.
Yeah.
We don't know that we're doing it.
Yeah. It's a hard pitch as an example to say, come to a Zen monastery, come to a Zen retreat where you will experience loss, suffering, and heartbreak like you've never experienced before, right? It's not an easy sell to do it that way, even though that may be the reality of it. Now, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, speaking about this heartbreak as the fertilizer for spiritual growth,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a hard pitch to make because what we're doing with spirituality, I think, is pointing to some essential immutable truths, like, for example, everything is impermanent. Everything that you think is permanent in your life is going to fade away.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you ever do is going to fade away, and you most likely, most of us, and there's nothing wrong with this, within 1 or 2 generations of our passing will be forgotten, right? Forgotten, quote unquote, forgotten. In at least in the knowledge, type of way that we were speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay because we're all part of this unknown, this enormous, unending, eternal unknown. And but people don't want to face that, right? I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh said that the cause of all suffering was people trying to make things that are inherently impermanent permanent, right? And there's so much truth in that. And so how could we make ourselves comfortable with the essential impermanence of everything in our lives, including ourselves, and point ourselves to a field where a deeper awareness and a deeper knowledge arises, and it's really about navigating the unknown. And the best way that I know of getting to that place is contemplative practice. Now I'm a Zen priest, and so meditate Zen means meditation, right? So we are the meditation school, and so it's a lot of meditation, meditation, meditation. That's not everybody's cup of tea, and actually, it's for definitely not for some people. If you have some underlying conditions, that type of very intense meditation is not the right way to go about it. But contemplation is so broad and so invitational, and there's so many different ways to access that everybody has it at their disposal to figure out a way to contemplate, by which we mean go to the beach, sit, surrender, let the universe speak to you directly, listen carefully to those waves and see what arises within you, what kind of feeling. And that is, you know, the waves come and then they go. Our thoughts come and then they go. Our lives come and then they go. And the water's still there. The universe is still there. The sun is still there, or something equivalent to it is still there. And so I think it's really the contemplative practice, whatever it is that any of us chooses to follow, is the way to become comfortable, to sleep with the unknown, and to be good friends with the unknown and with our deepest fears at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I'm glad you brought up the unknown there. I was going to ask you how does this all relate to the unknown? And
Yeah.
that's great. Can you share some? So you said Zen meditation. For
Yeah.
those who have no awareness about this at all,
Yeah.
what type of and not just Zen too, you can share some others too. What
Sure.
type of contemplative practices can help us in this process? So what type of meditation do you do with
Sure.
Zen?
So in Zen we practice something called Zazen. Zen means meditation. It comes from the Sanskrit dhyana, which was mispronounced in China as chana. That becomes Chan in China, Chan Buddhism. And Chan, the Japanese have trouble pronouncing the ch, so they turn Chan into Zen. And so it is the meditation school, and basically says that if you sit and breathe, deep breaths, and let your breath guide you, you'll land in a place where your awareness expands and your ability to process expands and your reactivity diminishes. And it's all about, this exercise where, I say to anybody starting a meditation practice, take 30 deep breaths a day. And this is between 5 and 10 minutes, and anybody can do it. If you're stressed, take 30 breaths. If you're stuck in an airplane, in an airport waiting for an airplane to depart that's been delayed 8 hours, you're going to have to learn how to practice this, right? Or you've been detained at a police station or at a border control, or you've had some kind, of altercation with somebody. Deep breaths. They always say take a deep breath, and that one you can take literally. Take a deep breath, and I think that's all of the meditation practices that I know, Zen or not, are all focused on breath and breathing. And you can have guided meditations. You can have, in Zen, we don't do guided meditations. We just say, just focus on the breath and let things arise and fall away. And that's how we practice it. But everybody breathes all day long, right? So it's something that comes very naturally to us. And if we just pay a little more attention to that, it actually allows us to release our blinkers, our blinders, and instead of going this way as we get older, narrower and narrower and narrower, and more certain of what we think, and then we go the other way, which is we become broader and broader and broader, and regain some of the perspective that we had as children, which is to be able to see things, across a much broader spectrum. And so I think that type of contemplative practice and its equivalent, some people experience it while dancing or playing music or hiking, walking, biking. People can meditate when they are quadriplegics and they don't have control of their bodies. They still can breathe deeply and focus their mind on the breathing, and they get a greater sense of awareness and connection thereby. So that's the practice. I mean, the essence of Zen meditation, I think, and probably you will concur, is all about deep breathing.
Yeah, exactly. Sitting with the breath, and you're saying something that's so important piece of that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it calms our nervous system. There's all these physiological benefits to that. But the one that's definitely related to this podcast, and I think a lot of stuff you're doing with spiritual companionship, um, is that awareness piece. I don't. I think I know. I know there's a lot of people talk about it, but man, we can talk about awareness more, because the power of awareness, like what you said, is so important that a lot of times we narrow things down into this thing that we think is certain, but the key is to be able to deal with uncertainty, because that's the reality of things. Every moment of our experience is uncertain because it's
Mhm.
impermanent and we don't know what's going to arise. And if we don't have any kind of capacity, or we do have the capacity, we haven't trained that capacity to be aware of all of these things, this broad possibility for uncertainty, or aware of all the complexity of our moment to moment experiences, that's going to be hard to live the kind of loving life that we want, to live the good life that we want. I think you and I agree that
Yeah.
love is our guiding principle here.
Mhm.
That's going to be difficult with lack of awareness. That awareness is so important piece of the puzzle. Can you say a little more about that? As a
Yeah.
Zen priest, I would love to hear.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you for asking well, for that reflection, which I concur with, and also for that invitation. Um, our field, we are these walking miracles. I don't know how it came to be that we have these tremendous capacities to see and hear each other and experience the wind and the rain and the water, the waves of the sunset and all of that. And so we are these like miraculous beings in many ways, and coming into awareness of that without thinking about who put us here, why are we here, what are we doing, what's the logic and the math of all of this, and is it evolution or is it something else? Doesn't, I mean, might be interesting to go into that, but it doesn't really, is not part of this exercise. It's just to realize how interconnected we are. That Seifu and Broderick are having a conversation with each other, but they're really having a conversation with the entire universe, right? It's like the universe speaking to itself is the conversation that we're having. And it's the conversation we're having with everybody all the time. It's one conversation that we're having with everybody who we will ever meet in our lives. And most of us aren't aware of that because we think we're our own little island, right? We've been conditioned to think that we're our own little island. And if we take that a step further, not only are we all connected to each other, we're connected to the rocks and the non-sentient, supposedly non-sentient things that actually I would argue probably are more sentient than we give them credit for, and the stars up above, which are memories, right? By the time we see a star, because it takes so long for that image to come to us, that star is no longer there. So whenever we look up at the stars, we're seeing nothing really. We're just seeing an image, a memory. We're seeing a memory of something, not the actuality of it. And so, what's beyond that? Well, we can think about it, and that's an interesting exercise. But we can feel our way into it, and I think it's an invitation. It's an invitation for us to remember ourselves as well, in relation to those memories that we see when we look up at the stars. So I think it's really finding our place, and actually it's not even finding, it's remembering our place. It's remembering. I always talk about this exercise more as a remembrance than a discovery, right? Because little children I always use this, and it never gets old for me, right? My daughter uh, looks up at the snow for the first time, and it hits her face, and she is just like, oh my God, this is the best thing that's ever happened, right? I mean, look at this. Isn't this what, Daddy, look at this snow. What is this? And it makes me remember how miraculous everything that happens in our lives really is. And what an invitation that is. What an invitation that is. So I think and I may have strayed from your initial question, but it's really the remembering of our true selves, I guess, is how I might describe it.
yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely. We're having a conversation with the universe, or the universe is having a conversation with itself. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I think sometimes we forget that. I'm glad you brought up the thing about the stars, because some of those stars that we're seeing, they're gone. They're just memories of them. Very interesting. I want to reflect on that one. I think there's a
Yeah,
lot there in that analogy.
yeah, yeah.
So we're coming to a close here. This has been lovely. Man, I would love to just pick your brain so much more. Maybe we had to come back at some point
Sure,
and focus the conversation on Zen and or maybe spiritual companionship and
sure.
talk about that at some point. But this initial conversation, let's just have a conversation about what the good life means, sharing your personal philosophy, take on it. And I'm sure there's a lot more that we did not uncover in this discussion. Absolutely. I mean, it's only an hour, so
Yeah,
I hope it raised more questions for all of us. I know it has for me. And this has just been great. So are there any final words you would like to share with the audience?
yeah. Thank you. So thank you, brother, for this invitation. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you and with everyone who listens to this. Um, I think the good life is really being about be, being in harmony with ourselves. And we all have special gifts. We're not, we are joined and interdependent in many ways, but we also have unique gifts. And it's really about falling in line, in love, and in flow with our unique gifts in the service of love. And being true to that no matter what we do on the surface, being true to those core guiding principles. And that may mean that you're not a multimillionaire, but it means that whenever you walk through the streets, you'll always have a smile on your face.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Seifu, for this wonderful
But
conversation.
I really
And
appreciate it.
yeah, me too. Looking forward to many more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.